Welcome back everybody to another episode of Double A Entertainment. And much like my last episode, this is a continuation of my top 10 of my list for my top 10 favorite film directors of all time. And today is definitely going to be very controversial. For those of you who have seen my recent list, one of my top 10 favorite film directors of all time, possibly top 5, is Roman Polanski. And yes, I am quite aware of the accusations. I'm very aware of what the hell went on with him and what the hell he did, but I'm not here to talk about that. And frankly, if you want to pick a fight in the comment section, go ahead, but no one's forcing you to watch this video. Go watch some other YouTuber, go watch some other video. I'm not forcing you to watch this. So if you're going to act like a mature adult, then please feel free to watch this. Or don't. It's a free country. Do whatever you want to do. So anyways, here's my top 10 favorite films from one of my personal favorite film directors of all time, Roman Polanski. At number 10, Tess. For those of you who are familiar with the name Roman Polanski outside of his notoriety as a director or The Scandal, Roman Polanski was the husband of his late wife, Sharon Tate, who, alongside her unborn child and many of her friends, were murdered by the Manson family and her Hollywood home. Shortly after the murder of Sharon Tate and her unborn child, Roman Polanski found a copy of the classic Thomas Hardy novel, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Inside of the front cover, his late wife wrote, "This would make a great movie." Fulfilling his wife's dreams, Polanski brought the Thomas Hardy novel to the big screen with up-and-coming actress Nastasia Kinski, who was the daughter of another controversial cinematic figure, Klaus Kinski. Tess is the story of a butterfly effect stemming from a misunderstanding between Tess's father and a census taker, or anthropologist type of dude, tells the father that he and his family, whom are at the bottom of the social ladder, are indeed related to the noble family of the D'Urbervilles. With breathtaking cinematography and dialogue taken straight from the novel, Tess is a heart-wrenching tale of a young girl whom at first seeks employment from her extended family, only to be seduced and then raped by her employer and cousin, Alec. Why did Hardy have to use that name? Not only is she raped, she is then left with a child, who then, spoiler alert, dies on account of Tess being shunned by her family and the church, and is left without a penny to her name. And that's just the beginning. As a young Tess continues her journey, she again falls in love, only to be heartbroken once more. Featuring a kick-ass score from one of my personal favorite film composers of all time, Philip Sade, Tess is an absolutely brilliant film that allows you to delve deep into not only the mind, but the heart and soul of the tragic character, as well as the cruelty society pushes onto the lower social classes. This is the type of movie that will break your heart only to have you coming back for more. At number 9, Venus in Furs. Venus in Furs is certainly unlike any of Polanski's other films, but with its masterful direction and dark sense of humor, it still manages to nose its way into my top 10. On a dark and stormy night, a playwright named Thomas, played superbly by the amazing Mathieu Amalric, is sitting in an empty theater, on the phone with his wife after sitting through countless auditions for his up-and-coming play. That play being an adaptation of the classic yet controversial novel Venus in Furs by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. Just to give you a taste of what kind of novel we are talking about, Sacher-Masoch is what the term sadomasochism comes from. Getting ready to leave, a gum-chewing, swearing actress pops in at the very last minute. Her name is, of course, Wanda, played convincingly by the director's wife, Emmanuelle Seigner. After throwing a hissy fit, the playwright eventually gives in and agrees to watch the mysterious actress's audition. This decision seems to pay off at first, as her performance seems to rise above any other he has ever seen. As the two begin to discuss the play, they seem to find it rather difficult to see eye to eye on the novel's author's motivation to write the book, as well as Thomas's on bringing the novel to the stage. As Thomas strives to alter Wanda's perspective, the two continue to act out several scenes of the script. At first, what seems to be mere child's play swiftly blurs the lines between reality and fiction. Though the playwright seems to be the straight guy of the situation, the actress always seems to have the upper hand. This leads to the two characters morphing into the stage characters. We get to see Wanda but Thomas through the ringer and turn him into a disciple. Featuring an amazing score by another amazing film composer, Alexandre Desplat, Venus in Furs is a great example of how a brilliant director can utilize two actors in a single setting with the help of some dark humor. At number 8, Death and the Maiden. Much like Venus and Fur, Death and the Maiden ideally utilizes a single setting, that is if you don't count an audience watching an orchestra, and 3 actors. Starring Ripley herself, Death and the Maiden centers around a former political activist played by Sigourney Weaver who was captured by South American government officials years ago and is brutally raped and tortured. She lives with her husband, who was a lawyer, played by Stuart Wilson. One night, a mysterious stranger, played superbly by Ben Kingsley, comes knocking at the door due to having car trouble. Not only is this stranger a friend of her husband, but he is apparently the same doctor who was tasked with keeping Weaver's character alive. We later learned the significance of the title, as Death and the Maiden is a classical piece of music from master composer Franz Schubert, which is played by the doctor in an attempt to comfort the prisoner as he would rape her, and no, I will not try to seek the logic in that. After stealing the stranger's car, he and the husband get blackout drunk. Weaver takes advantage of the situation by tying up the Nietzsche-quoting man to a chair and then interrogates him. Though he continues to deny his actions, Weaver insists that he is indeed guilty of her accusations, leaving Stuart Wilson between a rock and a hard place, not knowing on whether to trust a complete stranger or his PTSD-ridden wife. Not sure if this is a spoiler or not, just letting you know. Though IMDb claims we find out the answer, having watched the film 3 times, I'm still unsure of whether or not Ben Kingsley's character is guilty of Sigourney Weaver's accusations. Featuring an amazing score from my personal overall favorite musician of all time, Wojciech Killer, Death and the Maiden is an intense watch that raises many real-life questions that are significant to our everyday lives. Next up on our list, Macbeth. Whether you are a Shakespeare fan or not, Macbeth is a brilliant, fresh, and unique look at the immortal classic, and honestly, I was depressed for not having seen it till after I had read the stupid play for my junior year of high school. William Shakespeare and school do not mix well, and I am a bookworm. Macbeth was directed at quite the chapter in Polanski's career, as not only was he arguably at his most creatively and financially successful zenith, but he was also still coping with the brutal death of his wife and an unborn child at the merciless hands of the Manson family. Interesting fact, John Finch was cast in the title role because, according to Polanski, his physical characteristics were similar to those of Charles Manson. Starring, as I already mentioned, John Finch 1 year prior to one of, if not my absolute favorite Hitchcock film, Frenzy, Macbeth is an incredibly violent and bloody, and even at times sexual, take on the Shakespeare play. Not only was the bleak vision a direct reflection on the director's state of mind due to the Manson family murder, it even features a scene which was apparently taken straight from what the director witnessed as the Nazis stormed the ghetto he was living in with his family during World War II. Macbeth is a supposed war hero who was honored by the king with slim tubupkas of an honor. Being pushed around by his wife, the war hero was driven to regicide, the murder of a king. Macbeth then continues his bloody reign of terror, allowing him to ascend to the throne. As his insanity increases, bodies mysteriously begin to pile high. Though there have been many takes on the Shakespeare tragedy from unique visions by both actors and directors, Polanski brilliantly took full advantage of the dark subject matter and used it to his advantage, offering us some seriously gothic, morbid, and straight-up nightmare-inducing imagery. Also, with a good sum of the budget being provided by Hugh Hefner himself, we also see the type of content you would expect to see from the Playboy King himself. Though many like to argue it is too bleak and violent for their comfort zone, now you know how countless high schoolers feel when you fail them after making them read this shit. At number 6, Culdesac. Culdesac is the second English-speaking film from the Polish director, and though that may have led to some frustration amongst the actors and directors, neither of them allowed the drawback with translation get in the way of what Jack Nicholson considers to be his absolute favorite film of all time. Coming off of the success of Repulsion, Polanski cast Françoise Douliac, sister of Catherine Deneuve, and I know for a fact I butchered that name, as the lead. Much like Reservoir Dogs, this film revolves around a heist gone south without ever actually seeing it. The film starts off by introducing a hardened criminal played marvelously by Lionel Stander, as he and his partner played by Jack McGowan, who would later star in The Fearless Vampire Killers alongside the director himself. While his partner is mortally wounded, Lionel's character parks alongside a beach and seeks shelter in the kind of castle you would find in any Gothic novel. The castle is owned by married couple Teresa, played by Francois, and George, played by the one and only Donald Pleasance. Right off the bat, we know 2 things. Richard is a hardened criminal and possibly a cold-blooded killer, George is the beta of his relationship. As Richard holds the two at gunpoint, his friend is still in the car on the beach, and in fear of getting caught by authorities, the two criminals take advantage of the couple's non-consensual hospitality for medical treatment. After dying of blood loss, the couple are left with a possible killer with a loaded gun and are forced to hide him from the authorities until his other partners in crime pick him up. Although this plan seems to be a fail, as some unexpected guests arrive, friends of the couple, this allows the couple to get the upper hand as Richard has to disguise as the butler. Once the guests leave, tensions are high, leading to one hell of a climax. Culdesac is a dark comedy with a gangster and a gothic castle and features some of the greatest actors of all time. At number 5, The Tenant. Based off of a novel written by Roland Topper, who would go on to play Renfield in Werner Herzog's remake of Nosferatu, and considered to be Bruce Campbell, aka Ash from the Evil Dead's favorite scary movie of all time, you know for a fact you're in for something wicked. The Tenant stars the director himself, Roman Polanski, in the lead role and is a strange, Kafka-esque nightmare with morbid and occult themes throughout. The story follows a foreign bureaucrat, Tchaikovsky, who moves into a damp and run-down apartment straight out of any German expressionist film. The biggest catch, though, is that the previous tenant, a girl by the name of Simone Schul, attempted suicide by jumping out of a glass window and crashed through a glass roof below the apartment. After visiting the previous tenant, who is now doomed to a lifeless mummy in a cast suffering from severe pain 24/7, reminiscent of Johnny Got His Gun, the timid Tchaikovsky manages to strike up a passionate relationship with Simone's grieving friend Stella, played by Isabella Adjani, who would go on to act alongside the source material's author Roland Topper in Herzog's Nosferatu. Though already getting off at a strange start, things seem to get weirder and weirder. Aside from the constant nagging from his ruthless neighbors, the locals begin to shape Tchaikovsky into the late Simone Schul, which eventually begins to take a toll on the new tenant's mind. This leads to nightmarish visions and eventual violent outbursts at the hands of himself and his neighbors. Featuring a kick-ass score from the brilliant composer Philippe Saudet, The Tenant ranks as one of my top favorite Polanski movies, as not only do we get to see the director in a lead role, but it still ranks as one of his more surreal and outlandish and nightmarish works. With Kafkaesque imagery, The Tenant contains elements that go on to reappear in many of the director's films, even if you don't notice it. For example, living in the same room of a previous tenant and being placed in their shoes, voyeurism, claustrophobia, persecution, and alienation. At number 4, Rosemary's Baby. What many consider to be Roman Polanski's magnum opus, Rosemary's Baby, is in my opinion one of the 3 most effective horror films of all time, alongside the original 1963 The Haunting and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Based off of the novel of equal fame by Ira Levine, who also gave us The Stepford Wives, Rosemary's Baby is an absolutely brilliant horror film that tackles 2 absolutely terrifying subjects and mixes the 2 in one hell of a Molotov cocktail of horror. Rosemary Woodhouse moves into a New York apartment with her husband Guy, a struggling commercial actor, while the newlywed couple are trying to simultaneously enjoy their new lives together while also trying to conceive a child. However, their plans seem to make a new detour when their elderly neighbor couple overstep any boundaries and insist on taking over the couple's lives, going so far as to choosing an obstetrician for the expecting wife. Despite having the nightmare of her life in which she gets raped by the devil himself, Rosemary discovers she is in fact pregnant. Though a supposed dream did come true, her pregnancy is plagued with numerous unexpected complications which lead to an extreme weight loss and unbearable pain. However, instead of reading professional medical journals or going back to her old obstetrician, Rosemary's husband and neighbors won't hear a word of it and insist on her drinking weird herbal teas and what have you. As the pregnancy seems to get worse and worse, Rosemary comes to the realization that her neighbors have inducted her husband into the satanic cult and are now after her baby. Rosemary Woodhouse won't have it and is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her unborn child. However, the ending reveals the actual truth, which is far worse than what anybody could expect. Rosemary's Baby is unashamed of taking 2 topics which were rarely spoken of in the 1960s, pregnancy and the occult, and mixes the 2 like Mentos and Diet Coke, and leads to some of the most absolutely terrifying scenes in all of cinema history. At number 3, Repulsion. Aside from being the first English-speaking film of up-and-coming Polish director Roman Polanski, Repulsion was also the very first feature-length horror film which would later prove to be the director's favorite genre. Repulsion takes place in a London apartment occupied by two sisters, Helen and Carol, Carol being played by the hypnotic Catherine Deneuve. The two sisters are polar opposites, as Helen seems to be open about her sexcapades, as Carol is almost afraid of human contact. After Helen leaves to spend the weekend with her boyfriend, Carol is left home with her thoughts, a dead human corpse, a razor blade, and a maggot-infested rabbit. Luckily for us, the viewer, we come to learn more about Carol and her past and why she cannot hold any strong romantic relationship, let alone a sexually active relationship. After leaving a human corpse to rot in her apartment bathtub, she begins to descend even further into madness, leading to some intense, nightmarish visuals that would make Zdzisław Belkinski blush. Roman Polanski would later go on to state he was inspired to cast Catherine Deneuve as she looks like an angel with a tainted halo. Aside from the insane camera work and a razor blade attack that is bound to make the toughest gorehounds cringe, Repulsion, much like any other of Polanski's films, delves deep into intense and disturbing subject matter and is unafraid to present it at face value, and then some. At number 2, The Pianist. Perhaps his most personal film, The Pianist, is bar none the director's most true-to-life and significant film of his career. The Pianist tells the true story of famous Polish composer Władysław Szpilman, played brilliantly by Adrien Brody in the role of a lifetime. Before I go on, what makes it stand out from films such as Schindler's List and The Counterfeiter, which I do highly recommend, Roman Polanski is in fact a survivor of the Holocaust and has spent his entire childhood in ghettos and concentration camps. In the film, we follow Szpilman as he is separated from his family in the ghetto and sentenced to forced labor camps where countless Jews were starved, tortured, beaten, and murdered. The film does not shy away from the sheer brutality the Jews face at the hands of the Nazis in Germany, in Poland, and many other countries throughout Europe. In this film, Roman Polanski is unafraid to portray human beings being shot at point-blank range, whipped, and even children being beaten to death, and a crippled elderly man being thrown from a building in his wheelchair. Adrien Brody pulls his weight as well as we see Szpilman go from ghetto to concentration camp and the harsh reality of hiding for dear life in World War II Europe. This film is often ranked as the most true-to-life motion picture about the Holocaust alongside Schindler's List. And love him or hate him, this is one of the very few Holocaust movies directed by an actual survivor who witnessed the atrocities with his own eyes. Not to mention, the film remains significant to this day while countless acts of anti-Semitism go on throughout the world, including in the US. I would like to give an honorable mention to Polanski's adaptation of Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, as he went on to say it was a reflection of himself when he was a little boy and had to rely on the kindness of absolute strangers for survival. At number 1, The Ninth Gate. The Ninth Gate is a film and stars Johnny Depp as the lead character, who is an antique book dealer named Corso who rubs shoulders with the elite. One night he is handed a mysterious book by his top client named Balkan, played by none other than Frank Langella of Dracula and Skeletor fame. There are 3 things we learn right off the bat about this book. 1. There is a possibility the book is a forgery. 2. There are only 2 other existing copies. And 3. It was written by Lucifer himself. Literally. Mr. Corso is paid by Balkan to travel to France and Portugal to track down the 2 other existing copies by any means necessary. Throughout his journey, Corso was constantly under watch by 3 different parties. Balkan, a mysterious woman played by the director's wife, Emanuel Sainer, and some guy who really wants Balkan dead. While anybody involved with the investigation keep getting mysteriously murdered, Corso gets more and more determined to track down the 2 remaining copies in an attempt to unlock the Ninth Gate. What I love most about this movie, aside from the amazing score by my absolute favorite composer of all time, Wojciech Killer, is that Polanski doesn't play this off as any run-of-the-mill Satan movie with over-the-top supernatural jump scares and goth teens. Instead, this film plays off as a legitimate John le Carré-like political thriller with elite, respectable members of society who do in fact worship Satan. As this makes the entire story more believable, it takes away any camp and allows the film to get really dark and true to life. The Ninth Gate is absolutely brilliant and is a state-of-the-art, true-to-life horror thriller. Someone needs to get a copy of this to Blumhouse. So this was my list of my 10 favorite films from director Roman Polanski. And in the comment section, I would like to ask you guys for 2 things. Number 1, what is your personal favorite Polanski film? And number 2, can anybody recommend any really good Satan thrillers along the lines of The Ninth Gate? Thank you very much for watching this, and see you all next time.